Hello, everyone. I just want to let you know for many years, I was watching this major player in the life transformation area send emails, have major programs. And of course, I always admired her. And through the years, somehow we connected. We became affiliates, we became friends. And I am humbled today to have Jan Shaw participate in the Mastery Summit. Jan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be with you, Maria, and I appreciate you having me on your wonderful summit.
And it's our privilege. Thank you so much. So, Jan, let's start with that. Tell us what inspired you to participate in the Life Transformation Summit, and what message do you wish to convey to our audience today?
The very name Life Transformation Summit is exactly what is my mission. So there was absolutely no hesitation whatsoever because it was just so appropriate. And I think it's really exciting what you do, Maria, and I really wanted to be part of it, and I'm so glad I'm here. Um, Life transformation is the key to fulfillment, to fulfilling your purpose, to living the best life you can, because we carry a lot of baggage through our life experiences, particularly from early days. And it's very important if people want to achieve the level of success that they're desiring, that they have to get rid of this baggage. And so this to me is part and parcel of life transformation. It's a combination of letting go all of the things that sabotage you, that hold you back, that really block your progress, and then also having support in actually achieving the goals that you've set for yourself in practical terms, as well as in spiritual and metaphysical terms. So that's my message for people. Don't be put off by feeling that you're just not getting to where you want to go. There's always an answer, there's always a solution. And once you find that solution, then the world is your oyster.
So much, Jan. So, like you said, it's like a key, right? You open the door and there's a brand new world. So, Jan, tell us more about yourself. Tell us about your personal transformational experience. Are you open to sharing your story with our audience?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes, definitely. I was in corporate IT for many years, and I started my spiritual awakening about 2003, I think. I had various catalysts, dark night of the soul kind of thing that a lot of people go through. I won't go into the details of that, but it made me question everything. You get to a point where you think, there's got to be a better way than what I'm facing. And the universe or source or whatever you care to call them will give you these experiences to really kick you into reflecting and changing your path. And my path changed dramatically. I left corporate life because I found that the values were not in alignment with me, and I wasn't prepared to compromise those for the sake of a paycheck. I was a senior project manager in IT. I was in a very well-paid job, but things like values and also discovering purpose became very important to me. And that's actually one of the things I help clients with, is discovering their purpose, life and soul purpose. So I didn't go straight into coaching immediately. I actually started a business as a web developer, and I did that for about 6 years. And then it culminated in me actually thinking, I need to discover my purpose. And I also realized I'd been studying law of attraction for some time. And one of the things that I realized was that you can't move forward until you leave all this baggage behind. And so I wrote my life story right back to childhood and the traumatic and disempowering events and experiences that I'd had. And what I learned was how to reframe those, to change your perception of them completely. Because especially in the early years, you are very susceptible to being influenced and have your beliefs set by people in authority. And unless you resolve those, as I said, this is what holds you back. So I wrote my story. I reframed one of my early childhood events, and it shifted me completely. And then I worked on my purpose. And what I did was I reviewed all the experience I'd had, the skills I'd had, the roles I'd played. And I realized that in my IT career as a project manager and a manager of my team, that there were two key things I was most interested in. One was the application of IT to business, so the business side of it rather than the techie, geeky side, but also mentoring my staff, mentoring my team members, working with them to help them achieve their ambitions, to be successful in the roles that they were playing, which of course didn't just benefit them, it benefited me as their project manager, because then it was more or less assured that we would have successful projects, and that was the outcome. And one of the things which is quite amusing really is in a previous job, I was working for an IT consultancy, and I had a team then as well. I was a team leader, and it was my first introduction to Myers-Briggs personality profiling. And the funny thing about this is I used to think everybody thought like I did. I had no concept of the different personality types. And so when I went through the training for the Myers-Briggs for team leaders, it gave me such great insights in terms of the team members that I was having difficulty managing. And once I understood that, I'd figured out from the training that they must be this type or that type. Once I'd figured that out and changed my approach to them, it solved all the problems. So that was a milestone for me. And I've been very interested in the various different personality profiling systems. In terms of my own transformation, I would say one of the key things was recognizing the importance of reframing and changing perspective on things. But also, it was learning the principles of manifestation, which I've been studying now for probably 20 years, actually, because we're now in 2024. And I've actually experienced so many examples of manifesting things that are really quite magical. In 2011, I held a 7-day Festival of Enlightenment. It was something I was guided to do. And I set out to do that as a manifestation project against huge odds, and succeeded in that. It was a 7-day event, as I said, and it was held in Estes Park, Colorado. And I have to say, it's probably the most challenging thing I've ever done, because what it did was it really made me face my fears of not being good enough and not being able to do things. And every challenge that I faced just made me stronger. And that in itself was a great revelation to me in terms of changing my perspective on challenges that we face, because I call them evolutionary catalysts. that it's the challenges that make us grow, and it's how we approach those challenges is absolutely of paramount importance. If we consider ourselves a victim, then we are not going to grow. We're going to give in to the situation. What it's called in NLP is being at effect. In other words, you're allowing things to affect you rather than being at cause, where you're actually taking responsibility, you're focused on outcomes and solutions. And if you do that, the solution always comes. And there's always a gift in everything. And the gift is the transformation that it brings to you. So the festival was definitely a major thing for me. But I've also faced a lot of other challenges. And a very quick story is when after the festival, it was a great success in terms of the experience for people. And at the closing ceremony, I even got a clap of thunder from the heavens, which was quite amazing. Yeah. It was at the end of doing a peace pipe ceremony with the Lakota elder that was part of the festival. That was amazing. But then after the festival, although it was a success for the event itself, my husband at the time and I came out of it completely financially destroyed, put everything into it. And I won't go into all the details of why, but I got to the point of running out of money completely, running out of food, everything. And that was my greatest fear. So the universe conspired to make me face that greatest fear. And by that time, I'd come to the realization that had actually become a state of being of when you face a problem, you always go to the solution. So being in that situation, I ranted a bit to begin with, and then I thought, no, I've got to find a solution to this. And it meant a trip to the bank for various reasons. But as I was walking to the bank, and I'd set the intention I was going to manifest money. And I was walking along, and we came to like a piece of spare ground next to one of the major supermarkets, as we call them in the UK. And of course, I lived in the US for 13 years, by the way, and only came back last May. And I looked out the ground, and there was a dollar note lying on the ground. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. You can find nickels and dimes, but you don't normally find a note lying around or a bill. So I set the intention. I was grateful. I didn't think, oh gosh, this isn't enough. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much. And I set the intention I was going to find a $50 note. And so I went to the bank, did what I needed to at the bank. I was coming back, and of course, keeping my eyes peeled. And I got to an intersection, crossed over, and I looked down, and there was a $50 bill lying on the ground. And it was like, really? Is this real? And it completely changed my whole belief system around money, because part of my soul purpose is abundance. And I developed a real scarcity mentality. And this was a huge shift for me, because it told me two things. One is, when you need something, you'll always have it. You have the power to create what you need. And also the belief that we're so looked after by a higher power. And that was the biggest shift, I think, in my belief system, in my personal transformation, to go from that scarcity mentality and lack to, in effect, abundance. So it was amazing. And every experience has just added to that, the understanding of the manifestation process, the spiritual growth, everything has continued on from that point.
Really incredible. What a story, Jan. This is amazing. But it is so true. Sometimes we have to experiment with things, right?
Mhm.
I remember when I was first reading The Secret, I asked for butterflies. And wouldn't you know it, there were butterflies everywhere, right? And then you could conclude that if I could attract butterflies, I could attract anything, right?
Mm.
Very fascinating. The whole concept of reframing.
Mhm.
Now, how incredible is that? If you could take things that happened in your life and you put a new frame on them, brand new one that doesn't hurt anymore. But sometimes, Jan, don't you think we're attached to that pain? We think it's part of who we are, right? We don't want to give it up. We're holding on to it. We know it hurts, but we're still afraid. Why don't you tell us, Jan, what do you think are the major fears, frustrations? Why do you think people hold on to things and really don't want to change their life? Number one, do you think they hold on to things? And do you think it's fear and frustration that holds them back from taking the steps in order to make changes?
I think part of it is not recognizing what is actually controlling them in their life. It's quite a leap to start to ponder, why are these things happening to me? A lot of people go through life and their habits are ingrained. They get triggered by certain circumstances because they are similar to whatever the earlier incident was that has what we call a charged memory, and that it brings back unconsciously to people that same kind of reaction to it. The first phase in this really is awareness that you are carrying this baggage, as it were, and looking at ways of resolving it. There are some people who have memories that they really don't want to look at. There's a fear there and a resistance to that. Generally speaking, there's a lot of people with a resistance to change. If I change this, I'm going to be different, or life's going to be different. I'm not sure I can handle that. And of course, people self sabotage for that reason as well. So it the solution is simple, but not necessarily easy, because it does involve a complete change in mindset and recognizing that you are responsible for the path that you're on, and you're the only one that has the ability to change it. There's the joke about the how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb's got to want to change. So you have to have that real desire to change things. And it doesn't happen most of the time. It doesn't happen overnight. Actually, I've now trained in a technique that actually can change things very rapidly. But mindfulness is one of the key things, and developing that mindset, like I said, of you come across a problem, an evolutionary catalyst, and you shift immediately to outcome. What's the outcome that I want here? And the other thing that is the foundation of my teaching is what I call the power of neutrality. And that's based on the universal law that nothing has meaning until you assign an interpretation or a perception to it. And so the way I describe it is it's a bit like walking a tightrope. And the tightrope is the neutral position. And then you can either, in the face of a challenge or a situation, you can either step off to the left into the abyss of negativity, or you can step off to the right onto the solid ground of positivity and focused on positive outcome. And this is the way that you can reframe things yourself. You can choose to look for the gift in something, you can choose to look for the outcome, and you're starting from the point of neutrality. You're making the decision. Do I get negative about this? Do I become a victim of it? Or do I look for a positive interpretation of it? And the simplest expression of that is, this challenge is my opportunity for more growth and learning new things, facing things that I haven't faced before, perhaps one of these charged memory situations. So it's my opportunity to heal and move forward.
Do you think that some people believe that if I give my traumatic experience a positive framing, then I'm excusing all those other people that were involved? And I don't want to excuse them. I want to hold them down. I want to hold them responsible. Do you think that's part of the complexity of all this?
Yes, I think so. One of the very, very important things is actually being able to forgive. And people think that means you're letting them off the hook. You're not. You can recognize their part in whatever situation occurred, but also you're letting go of negative energy. If you hold a grudge, you're doing more damage to yourself than to the other person that you are holding responsible. And that negative energy is very damaging to you, and it holds you back. If you're stuck in resentment, that's not going to enable you to move forward. And one of the techniques that I've been trained in now is timeline therapy. And this is one of those situations where you can actually resolve these negative emotions almost instantly. And what it does is it takes you back to your first unconscious memory of when the situation, the very first situation arose that created that negative energy. And you're acting as an observer of that situation. And it can be in your lifetime, it can be pre-birth, it can be in a past life. And I've experienced this myself. And part of the process is to really get in touch with your unconscious mind to get the learning from it. And that in itself is a reframing process, because by understanding what you learned from that experience, you've changed it into something positive. And that in itself is powerful. And I've done it with anger, and it completely takes that emotion away, that charged emotion. So you're not triggered anymore. It's amazing, actually. I love it.
Thanks so much for that, Jan. So you just mentioned the timelining process. Are there any other ways that you could share with our audience as to how to overcome the obstacles? How do you overcome the fears, everything that's holding you back from moving forward, making the decision to change your life, and getting the faith that this change is for good, that on the other side of the rainbow is actually good things. It's not going to be a bad result.
Mhm. I think what's very important is to have a facilitator, because it's very difficult to change a perception if you haven't got anybody else to really work with you on perhaps seeing different perspectives, or helping you to get in touch with that unconscious mind, like in timeline therapy, to reframe from the learning. And I've also been trained in another technique, which is more very much an in-depth spiritual one, where it's done through a person questioning you, very simple questions. But in the case of transgressions, where you may have felt that someone else did something to you, and this is where, you know, you're holding resentment or what have you. And the method of questioning gets you right into your subconscious mind. And when I went through the process myself, I could feel myself just going deeper within and deeper within. And the same question is asked of you until you feel you've got a win, as we call it, which is like the aha moment of, oh, wow, that was what it was really about. This was the part I played in it. Because even with transgressions, there's always more than one person involved. So it's really getting to the core truth of situations that is so important. But as I say, it's most helpful if you have someone to work with you who is, I would say, not a close friend or a relative, because there is always an emotional charge there, but someone who has no agenda, is non-judgmental. And of course, that's what we as coaches do. That's our role. And to have professional help with it is what really makes that move much quicker than struggling on yourself, trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I love that you said a facilitator could hold your hand through it, or it's very difficult to do this by yourself, right? Because you have your own self sabotaging you, stopping you, telling you to stop, right? You always have those thoughts that are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? You're fine this way. So, it's so very good. Jan, why don't you tell us, what did I not ask you? Are there any questions that I didn't ask you? Any additional messages that you would love to give to our audience?
I think enjoy the journey. This is a journey. My belief system, I'm spiritual, not religious. I don't follow organized religion. I've had my spiritual awakening and had quite a transformational experience, almost a visitation, if you like, a critical point in my life, which was what flipped my switch from very logic dominated, left brain dominated, especially being in an IT background, to it's like it flipped the switch on my intuition. So I'm now guided by intuition, backed up by logic. And so I always say, let your intuition lead and your logic be the method or the means by which you do whatever you've been intuitively guided to do. And the problem is, and I've been guilty of that myself, is that very often your logic is saying, oh my goodness, you can't do that. That just doesn't make sense. What's going to happen if you do that? And most people that let the logic override the intuition find it doesn't work out too well at all. So intuition is really important to develop and to trust. And I guess the message that's part of that is also understanding that we have both a soul purpose and a life purpose. And the life purpose is what presents us with the perfect environment and situations for our soul purpose, which is to heal certain things, to develop in a certain way. And so those two things work together. And I must also add that very often you will manifest something that you had no conscious intention of, because it's your higher self that knows your life path that you've chosen, that will bring these things to you to guide you along the path. And it can happen just simply somebody suggests, oh, have you read this book? That happened with me with a book by Dolores Cannon, Four Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth. And I discovered from that I'm a first waver, I'm a first wave volunteer. And if you develop that level of awareness and tuning into your intuition, you'll then spot the signs of the direction you need to go and the path you're meant to follow and the action that you need to take. For example, I was starting to be guided that it was time to come back to the UK. And people were asking me, why did you decide that? And there were practical things. I've got family here. But it was just being tuned into that intuition, knowing that now was the right time. And in fact, I'd thought about it a year earlier, and then no, it's not the right time. And then it came up again and again, and then it was the right time. All these things transpired to indicate that it was the right time to do it. And so I did it. And there are people think I'm crazy. I dropped everything and went to the US at the age of 55. And then 13 years later, I dropped everything in the US and came back to the UK, past the time that most people would make such a huge change. But I've always been up for change and challenges. So I pledge myself to follow the will of the higher power and to be guided. And the experiences I've had in that process have been quite hair-raising at times, but I wouldn't change a thing because that makes us what we are today. Follow your intuition is the message. Trust it. Remember that in manifesting the path you want, you do have to take action. You don't just sit there and wait for it to land. There are, sometimes it does, but most times even the act of looking for signs is part of the process and recognizing them. And that is really what helps you keep that vibrational frequency high. It keeps the faith high, the belief that it's actually in progress, because it's belief in the possibility and belief in your deserving of it that fuels the whole manifestation process. That's like the turbocharge. If you keep swapping from I want it or I can't and I can't have it backwards and forwards, you're interfering with the whole process. You're switching it on and off like a light switch. Faith and belief in the possibility, and knowing that also it is a spiritual process, and it is very much aligned with your purpose.
Thank you for this, Jan. This was incredible. You introduced something that has not been introduced in the summit so far, which is the soul purpose and life purpose. Normally we talk about purpose, but absolutely there's multiple levels. And also to trust your intuition, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you just get in the flow. Sometimes you're just in that flow. And in order to get into that flow, you need to notice things, right? I tell people who ask that I am religiously spiritual. I'm very religious and I'm very spiritual, or I'm spiritually religious. To my religious friends, I always say, notice the miracles. Notice
Mhm.
the miracles because sometimes I see it in their lives and they don't see it. Things, incredible things happen in our lives that we totally dismiss. And if you're spiritual, just notice the synchronicity that's going on. It seems sometimes that I'm an instrument in an orchestra, right? And if I don't follow the song that's being played, everything just gets messed up. Everything is pushing you to get back into the flow, right? Getting into that flow and trusting your intuition and understanding, thank you, Jan, not only your life purpose, but your soul purpose. Then you know exactly what you should be doing, right? Jan,
Absolutely.
This is incredible. This is amazing. And on top of it, I know that you have a free gift for our audience. Would you like to share what that is?
Yes, certainly. What I'd like to offer the audience is a free manifestation and personality assessment and an evaluation session. And this is a really powerful tool because it's different from a personality profile. It's a snapshot of where you are in your life now at the time that you take the questionnaire. And what it does is it indicates your strengths, your growth areas, and what is really critical, your what we call the breakthrough point. And the breakthrough point is the most critical thing to work on that will create the most transformation. And it's so accurate and powerful. I've had many people go through this and be absolutely astonished at how accurate it is. And yes, I'd like to offer the listeners a free personality and manifestation assessment and what I call a breakthrough discovery session. So you get to know your breakthrough.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Jan. To the audience, this has been an incredible session. I hope you have lots of questions for Jan that she will answer live. And again, Jan, thank you so much for this amazing, incredible privilege, sharing your message at the Life Transformation Mastery Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've loved every minute of it. I appreciate you.
Wonderful. We very much appreciate you, Jan. Thank you very much.